The year is 1972. What we have seen up to date is a dominance of the late 60s and the early 70s of the British Big Three. Led Zeppelin in particular has been a dominant force, winning several awards. But in 1972, Led Zeppelin's sitting this one out. They're taking a much needed rest and vacation, which leaves opportunities for others. Also, keep in mind, Robert Plant has won Best Vocalist of the Year 3 years running. With him sitting it out, it gives another opportunity for another singer to take the award this year. But just as Robert Plant steps out, two of the greatest heavy metal singers of all time step into the void. Who are they? Find out next. Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to another episode of The Metal Dude Abides. This week we're going back into our Fixing the Grammy series. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this series, we're basically going back in time and giving heavy metal its long overdue love and respect. Love and respect it never got from the Grammys, as they constantly ignored what was going on in the metal landscape. Tonight we're taking a look at 1972. And as we were talking about in the intro, what we're seeing is an era of dominance by the British Big Three, as they're known: Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, and Led Zeppelin. But this year, Led Zeppelin does not have an album or song. So who's going to step into the void? Well, let's start out with Newcomer of the Year and work our way through the awards. 1972 is shaping up to be a really unique year, an exciting year in the Newcomer of the Year category. Typically speaking, this category has been a bit of a snoozer the past few years. We've either had like a slam dunk Hall of Fame candidate who runs away and hides in this category, or we have a year where there's nobody of real interest, nothing really to write home about. But this year, there are 4 strong nominees, and it's starting to show the reach that heavy metal and hard rock is having across the globe. Our first nominee is a band named Buffalo. They put out an album called Dead Forever. This is probably our first Australian band to be mentioned on these videos. You probably could win a bet. Most people would probably give that honor to AC/DC, but no, Buffalo comes before them, and they have a really sensational album. One of my favorite songs on this album is the oddly titled Bean Stew, but a really good band. And this is not only a really talented band out of Australia, they're going to put out a sophomore album that in 1973 called Volcanic Rock that is just going to be a monster. But after that, they kind of fade away, really not having much of a career. The next band that we're going to look at is a band that did have a literally one-hit wonder career, and that band is Ursa Major. They are a band coming out of America, and their guitarist, the legendary Dick Wagner, he quits the band shortly after this album is created and goes on to join Alice Cooper. But they put out a tremendous self-titled album. Really like this album. Probably the highlight is Backstage Queen, really good song. And another little interesting trivia, one of the former bandmates in this band, none other than Billy Joel. So we have a couple of bands that have 1 or 2 albums, but don't really have the long storied history. Well, the other 2 candidates we have are the exact opposite, putting out some of the biggest metal in the history of the sport. Our first nominee is Blue Oyster Cult. You've probably known them. They have had a string of hits throughout the mid to late 70s and early 80s. Still going to this day. Hall of Fame level career. They put out their very first album, their self-entitled Blue Oyster Cult album. Really, it's argued that it's not one of their strongest albums, but it's got some great songs. Among them, Cities on Flame with Rock and Roll, one of my favorite all-time BOC classics. And the fourth nominee is the Scorpions. Again, two bands that had very short careers and two bands that had Hall of Fame careers. The Scorpions are probably the most popular band of the four. They put out their initial album, Lonesome Crow, which is one of the things I really love about this album is it is the only Scorpions album to feature Klaus Meine and Michael Schenker throughout the entirety of the album. Michael Schenker, of course, one of my favorite guitarists of all time. So Lonesome Crow is the nominee for the Scorpions. What a wild contrast, again, between two legendary bands and two little-known bands. We'll see who comes out on top. And the winner is... the Scorpions win Newcomer of the Year, narrowly beating out Ursa Major. Ursa Major really put up a struggle here. This was a coin toss. Here's the reason I went with the Scorpions. I do get the benefit of hindsight, and we all know the Scorpions go on to have a Hall of Fame career. While Ursa Major, their driving force was their guitarist and lead singer, Dick Wagner. Well, Dick Wagner leaves to go join up with Alice Cooper in the very same year, 1972, as they put out this album. So even though maybe technically I think the Ursa Major album a little bit better than the Scorpions' Lonesome Crow, I also know the band breaks up that exact same year. Kind of hard to give Newcomer of the Year to a band that didn't even survive the year. Great album. I could see going either way. But since they didn't survive the year, I'm going to go with the Scorpions. The other thing about the Scorpions is this is a very special album for me and a very special debut for me because this album features one of my favorite guitarists of all time, Michael Schenker, and also has one of the best vocalists in the history of heavy metal in Klaus Meine teaming up. This is the only Scorpions album that has Klaus and Michael through its entirety, so it has a special place in my heart. The Scorpions are not nearly as heavy as they're going to be, so many people may not gravitate towards this album. Much more of a psychedelic album than it is a metal album, but the talent is just overflowing on this album. And so, Newcomer of the Year is the Scorpions. Now, the Grammys that year, well, they went with America. Not a big fan of America, but here's what I found interesting. One of the nominees for Newcomer of the Year that year was a band, I don't know, maybe you've heard of them, the Eagles. Now listen, I like to pick on the Grammys. And there's times where a great band shows up on the scene, but no one knows that they're great for a couple of years. They need to hit their stride. We just talked about that a little bit with the Scorpions and Blue Oyster Cult. Maybe you don't see what they're going to become because they're not there yet. But this is not the case with the Eagles. The Eagles came out swinging and were one of the biggest bands in the world right off the bat. If you couldn't detect that this was a great band, well, you just had to have been a Grammy voter because everybody else on planet Earth saw the talent of the Eagles. So again, Scorpions for Newcomer of the Year and heavy metal. And I have to do it. The Eagles have to be Newcomer of the Year across the board. But again, the Scorpions and Ursa Major should have both received nominations that year. All right, let's go to Best Instrumental Performance. (1972) Best Instrumental Performance. And the nominees are... no surprise, Black Sabbath with their song Supernaut. Again, in the early 70s, Tony Iommi's guitar playing is just unmatched. He is the king of the riffs, and there are several great songs off this album, Volume 4, that could be considered. My favorite is Supernaut. It is a little bit of a departure for Black Sabbath in that it's a little bit more fast and upbeat than you're used to, that really doomy stoner metal. Supernaut actually kicks it up a gear and is one of my favorite songs by Sabbath. And of course, Tony Iommi's, guitar work is just outstanding. Now, while Tony Iommi's speeding it up a bit, our second nominee, Deep Purple, with their Hall of Fame level song, Smoke on the Water. Ritchie Blackmore, mostly known for his speed metal, his fast playing, his classical virtuoso type style, he kind of ventures into Tony Iommi land and puts together a very slow, crunchy riff. And arguably the best known riff in the history of heavy metal as the intro to Smoke on the Water. Everybody's heard it. Everybody who's picked up guitar and has aspired to be a great heavy metal guitarist, this was the song that they wanted to learn and play. So a great riff. It's kind of interesting as Tony Iommi goes into a little bit of a speedier metal. Ritchie Blackmore comes the other way and gets much more heavy and riffy. The next song out of 1972 is by the Edgar Winter Group. Edgar Winter, one of the greatest guitarists of all time, and his song Frankenstein. Now, this is truly an instrumental. There's no lyrics into this, and it is one of the best heavy metal instrumentals of all time, covered countless times. One of my favorite covers of it by Gary Hoey. But nonetheless, Frankenstein has to be on this list, one of the all-time greats. Now, going from all-time great to little-known band, I found this band when I was back researching 1972. Never heard of them before. Little band by the name of iDrive, and a song, Down, Down, Down. Now, if you go to look this up, saying, I've never heard of this song, much like I did, I will warn you. The first 50 seconds of this song is like some sort of like computerized voice intro that is absolute rubbish. And then the song kicks in. And I'm shocked at how good of a song this is, to have never heard it before. And again, probably a little bit of that has to do with this really weird intro where they're talking about gramophones and all sorts of nonsense. But one of the things that's really great about this song is it's got a fantastic classic metal riff to it. And I don't know who produced this album, but it has a very modern sound to it, much more 80s maybe than 70s. I don't know what happened to this band. I don't know. You talk about a one-hit wonder. Never heard of them, but I love the guitars in this. I love the production of this. Shout out to iDrive, wherever you are, for the song Down, Down, Down. And finally, Uriah Heep with the song Easy Living, a monster song with great Hammond organ, a really heavy bass lick in this one, great guitars. Uriah Heep, many people put into the British Big Four. I've never been that big of a fan of Uriah Heep, but they always seem to have at least one song that's just an absolute classic. This year, that song is Easy Living. And the winner is Smoke on the Water, Deep Purple. Now I've got a confession to make. I am a huge Ritchie Blackmore fan. Love the stuff he does in Deep Purple. Love the stuff he's going to do in Rainbow. Smoke on the Water is not his greatest work by any means. probably not even the greatest guitar work he's done on this album. So why did I select it for Musical Performance of the Year? Because it's iconic. This is Hall of Fame level. There are so many people I know that wanted to play heavy metal guitar. This was the first song they picked up. This is the song they wanted to learn right off the bat. We talk about the fact that Tony Iommi is king of the riffs forevermore. Ritchie Blackmore, this isn't really his cup of tea. And yet here he writes the catchiest, most known riff in the history of heavy metal right here. So I had to go with Smoke on the Water. It's just, at some point you have to put the social relevance of a song as well. And this song was just too big and too popular to discount. Even though technically there was probably better guitar work on this album from Ritchie. Now the Grammys this year goes with Billy Preston. I'm not going to go into it, folks, but this is a terrible choice. This is some sort of funkadelic thing that was going on back in the 70s. No, stop, quit. Every one of these nominees that we listed here is better than Billy Preston. How in the world, again, the Grammys, who are supposed to be the all knowledgeable people about music, could miss Smoke on the Water? They don't know Black Sabbath exists throughout this time. Don't know Uriah Heep's putting out great tunes. No, we're going to go with Billy Preston. You want to look up the song? Go for it. It's not good. And it has no place winning a Grammy when you have such great guitar gods just bringing it every year over on the heavy metal side. Anyway, let's go on to the suddenly wide open Best Vocalist of the Year category. As I said in the opener, Robert Plant has dominated Best Vocalist of the Year, winning the award in 69, 70, and 71. With his absence in 72, who could possibly be ready to take home that prize? Let's talk about these nominees. Our first nominee is Deep Purple with a live version of Child in Time. If you remember, a couple of years ago, Child in Time was nominated, but again, lost ultimately to Robert Plant. Well, if you thought that was good, Ian Gillan comes back with a live version that's even more spectacular. Maybe his, many great vocalists have that highlight performance, that high watermark. This is considered by many his best vocal performance, and this live version may indeed be this seminal version of this song. The second nominee is Dust from Learning to Die. Again, this is a band that had a couple albums in the early 70s, but ultimately didn't get too far and broke up, but have two really good albums that I highly recommend. And then came the legend. You see his picture up on the wall. My favorite vocalist of all time. He has arrived. Ronnie James Dio. At this point, he's still in the band Elf, which isn't quite hitting his stride yet, but you can already start to see what a vocal performance, what a monster he's going to be in this category for years to come. He gets nominated for his work in the song Nevermore. If you're a big fan of Dio but have never really delved into the Elf, I highly recommend this song, Nevermore. And again, it really is a warning to the metal world that the greatest vocalist in the history of metal has arrived. Speaking of which, we also have the debut from the Scorpions and their song, In Search of the Peace of Mind. I almost went with Inheritance here, but you can't go wrong. Klaus Mein's voice is so pristine on this album. He has a number of ridiculous songs that I could have gone with. Klaus Mein is not a name that gets put into a lot of lists I see for best metal vocalist, and they're missing the boat. This guy's pipes are amazing. And again, this is early in Klaus's career before he's had some of the throat surgeries and everything that he had to go through, and it never has sounded better. Scorpions with In Search of the Peace of Mind. And while we're talking about iconic singers, while we're talking about Dio, while we're talking about Klaus Meine, how about Phil Lynott? Because Thin Lizzy shows up and does their rendition of Whiskey in the Jar. Now, I don't know that much about vocals, I suppose, but I don't know that Phil Lynott, if you were to take his songs to a classically trained singer, would say, oh yeah, this guy's, one of the best singers of all time. But man, I dig his voice. It's just got this uniqueness, this smoothness, and Thin Lizzy, again, a great band and a really iconic sound coming from Phil, R.I.P. And they come charging out of the gates with this great cover of Whiskey in the Jar, and the winner is Child in Time, live by Deep Purple. Ian Gillan has been the bridesmaid for the last several years. And while you cannot top the great vocal performances coming down the road from Dio, coming down the road from Klaus Meine, this is considered by many his landmark achievement, and in the live version on Made in Japan is the seminal version of this song. Now, the Grammys this year went with a guy by the name of Harry Nilsson, who had a song or an album out called Nielsen Schmielsen or something of that sort. Listen, folks, you cannot top the great vocal performances that are going on in the Metal Kingdom right now. We've seen Robert Plant completely be ignored. We see Ian Gillan completely being ignored. These are the best vocal performances of the 70s. And while I'm sure Harry Nilsson, I listened to the song, it's a fine song, fine voice, doesn't compare, folks, to any of the singers that we just talked about. Some of the weakest nominees in the Grammys this year, I tell you. And this is no exception. Best Vocalist of the Year for metal and most vocalists across the board. Congratulations, Deep Purple. Congratulations, Ian Gillan, for clean sweep of the Vocalist Awards. Now let's go on to Song of the Year. The metal scene up to this point had been dominated by British bands, but we're starting to see the emergence of some really good American bands, including this first one, Alice Cooper, with his trademark iconic song, School's Out. You've got to love this song. Heard this song, of course. I was still in school when this, I wasn't even in school when this came out, but was in school when I heard this song. And what an anthem for the youth of America, let me tell you. There was nothing better. And, you get to that last day of school for the year, that bell rings for the last time, and you're off for summer break. So I love this song. Nowadays with everything going on in the world, some of the lyrics might be a little controversial, but School's Out Forever at the very end of that is just classic. Alice Cooper really knows how to build up to a crescendo and does so beautifully in this song. The second song we're going to talk about is Supernaut, Black Sabbath, off their Volume 4 album. I talked about this one in the musical performance. Tony Iommi really outdoes himself on this one. Great riff, great song. Volume 4, There's a lot of great songs on this album. This one just happens to be my favorite, and so it gets nominated for Song of the Year. Another American band, and a band we talked about in the newcomer category, Blue Oyster Cult, with their classic Cities on Flame with rock and roll. I love this song. You know, there's Blue Oyster Cult is one of those bands that, let's be honest here, they get a little weird from time to time. Very eclectic tastes, Blue Oyster Cult. And so whenever I've listened to a Blue Oyster Cult album, for instance, it can be a real up and down experience where you may really like a certain song or two and you may really not care for a certain song or two. Especially in their early years, very experimental band, doing a lot of different things. But then every once in a while you would see the promise. You'd see the greatness. Cities on Flame is that way for me. Again, kind of back to that really cool riff in this song. Has just a great beat. Love this song. Cities on Flame by Blue Oyster Cult. We talked about this earlier. The iconic song Deep Purple, Smoke on the Water. And finally, Uriah Heep with Easy Living. Again, one of the best, most upbeat songs you're ever going to hear. Love this song, and it is our 5th nominee. And the winner is Smoke on the Water, Deep Purple. You know, we spent so much time, salivating over this great riff. We really didn't have a chance to talk about the song content. One of the most interesting songs ever written, if you think about it. This was about the Montreux Music Concert Hall being burned down, where Deep Purple was getting set to play there, and watching this, this building go up in flames right in front of them. What an interesting story, and to take that experience of watching this building that you're going to play in burn to the ground in front of you, and writing this great song out of your hotel room, and turn it into, again, one of the songs that when you think about Deep Purple, you probably think about this song. So congratulations to Deep Purple for Song of the Year, Smoke on the Water. Now, I've been really hard on the Grammys up to this point. Their Song of the Year was by Roberta Flack. The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. And I'm not going to trash this one. I actually think this is a very good song. Roberta Flack has a very beautiful voice. This is a beautiful love song, and I think it is a worthy nominee for Song of the Year. Having said that, I still think Smoke on the Water is going to win the award. Even though the Grammys didn't completely botch this one, I still think Smoke on the Water is the best of the bunch. So congratulations, Deep Purple. Not only do you win Metal Song of the Year, but in the overall category, you also win Song of the Year Clean Sweep. Speaking of clean sweeps, we're going to now go to Best Album of the Year. And if you've been keeping track, Deep Purple has won all the categories up to this point. Are they going to do a clean sweep across all metal categories? Let's find out. All right, 1972 Album of the Year. Nominees are Black Sabbath with Volume 4. Now, Black Sabbath has won Album of the Year the last 2 years for their albums Paranoid and Master of Reality. Well, the defending champs are not going to go down without a fight. They came out with a stunningly good album, Volume 4. Now, we've talked a bunch about my favorite song on this album, Supernaut, but they also have a couple of other very iconic songs, including Snowblind and Changes. So Deep Purple's going for the clean sweep here, but Black Sabbath is, they are putting up a fight. Speaking of Deep Purple, they are the nominees for their album Machine Head. Now, I would argue that In Rock may be the best Deep Purple album, but there is not a better produced, better sounding album than Deep Purple's Machine Head. This, by many people, is considered their opus, and for good reason. It's not quite as raw as In Rock, but the song quality across the entire board and the production of this is unmatched in the Deep Purple catalog. We've talked about Smoke in the Water, but don't sleep on Highway Star, which might be my favorite song on this album, and the list goes on and on. Deep Purple, Machine Head. Our third nominee is also Deep Purple, as they put out a tremendous live album made in Japan. This is maybe the first time we see this whole heavy metal being produced in Japan for these live albums. Deep Purple goes in and takes all the great songs from In Rock, all the great songs from Machine Head, all the great songs in their catalog, and just puts on a blistering performance. We talk about this all the time. I'm not really big on nominating live albums because it's kind of a cheat code, if you will, because it's like the best of. We're going to put all of our best songs on one album and go to town. But if, in fact, though that live performance is so groundbreaking and becomes the seminal versions of many of these songs, I do make an exception here and there. And this is one of those times. Great live album, Deep Purple, made in Japan. Our fourth nominee, the Scorpions, with Lonesome Crow. Now, there's some people out there that may not dig the very early Scorpions, and I understand. It's a little different. Let's face it, it's a lot different than when the Scorpions finally break big almost a decade later. But you've got Klaus Meine. You've got Michael Schenker. You've got some great songs on this album that really, while they're not maybe as heavy as the Scorpions would become, they still have great guitar tone, great vocals. The Scorpions, I think this is one of those underrated albums that people could give a second listen to and realize that this was a groundbreaking album, and it sets the stage for a Hall of Fame career. And our fifth nominee is Ursa Major. We talked about them as well as newcomers. Kind of the opposite of the Scorpions. One-hit wonders, but what a hit. This album rocks from start to finish. Hard to pick a song off this one that's not good, but my favorite is Backstage Queen. Love that song. Love the riff in it. While Dick Wagner is going to go on to do great things with Alice Cooper, again, really surprised that this band didn't stick around. The fact that they made this much great music out of a trio band, sensational stuff. Anyway, and the winner is the defending champs have been dethroned. Album of the year, Machine Head, Deep Purple. This was a very close contest. Could have gone either way. I would say that Black Sabbath Volume 4 is one of the best Black Sabbath albums of all time. But you can't top Deep Purple Machine Head. It's just too consistent. It's just got too many of their, classic songs on it. Ritchie Blackmore's never sounded better. And quite frankly, this is really like the last great album we see from the Mark II era, as Ian Gillan, Ritchie Blackmore, Roger Glover, Ian Paice, all of the band is really cooking at the highest levels. Unfortunately, Deep Purple can't get along, as is the story with many bands, and they start to kind of fall apart. And again, we don't see Mark II much after this, but here they pull it all together and put together one of the best albums in the history of heavy metal. Hall of Fame level album. There was really never much doubt. Black Sabbath gave them a tussle, but this is just too good of an album. Anyway, that is 1972. But before we sign off, just a reminder, if you like the content of this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We just passed the 6-month mark, and, still a young channel, still looking for your support so we can break through the old YouTube algorithms and get this content out for more and more people. I really appreciate all the support you've given me over the first 6 months, and hope to be putting out lots more content over the next few weeks. We're here every Tuesday live, 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, to produce new videos. Come join us. In the meantime, this is the Metal Dude signing off. As always, take care.